This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories, and welcome to my review of the Darth Bane Trilogy. And with it, if you have not read these books yet, I would definitely recommend not watching this, since this trilogy is a really great trilogy. But I'm gonna just go and start off with the first book, Darth Bane, Path of Destruction. And this book is really unique since it's the one that explains how the old Sith Order was destroyed and how the Rule of Two was established. And with it for, I'd say, about maybe half the book, he isn't even a Sith yet, and we're seeing the evolution of the man named Dessel, or commonly known as Dez, into the Sith Lord Darth Bane. And once he becomes Bane, he does have an interesting journey into becoming the Sith Lord he'll eventually become famous for being. And with it, really, if you didn't know that he established the rule of two, then you'd be in a lot more suspense of just really what would happen with him. And with it, you see how he is trying to become a Sith, but he is having a hard time, even though he was doing really well at first. After he goes and kills another student, he basically cuts himself off from the Force and has to retrain himself. And with it, he has to do it in secret, and taking lessons both from the Blade Master and from another student named Githany. And with it, he's eventually able to go and take over the Sith Order and trick everyone into a fate far worse than death, with them all being killed in the Thought Bomb. And with that, he is able to end the Sith Order. And after he does that, he reinvents it with the Rule of Two, which he is inspired by Revan to make, realizing that there can only be one master and one apprentice, or else the Sith will become weaker each generation, with lesser apprentices teaming up to kill the master. But if they keep one master and one apprentice, it will ensure that the apprentice will always be more powerful than the master, and once the Sith are ready, they will be able to go and conquer the Jedi. And with this, I think that such a good book. You get really just so much interesting stuff as you see how just an average man who had a lot of bad luck gets turned into one of the most ruthless and evil beings in the galaxy, and how he goes and establishes an order and a rule that will, in 1,000 years, lead to Palpatine taking over the Republic. And you can just see how wise this was and how interesting he is. And it was just so interesting to see this development and how he was able to go and manipulate the Sith into killing each other. And really, you don't know how the war would have fully gone out in the short term with the Brotherhood of Darkness. But once they were able to go and conquer the Republic, if that did happen, they would probably suffer the same fate as all Sith did, with them being overthrown. And Bane's plan was probably the best thing, since the only reason it was stopped was because Vader turned back to the light side and killed his master. If he didn't, even if the rebellion did win at Endor, the Sith would still rule the galaxy, and construction of the second Death Star to be seen as a similar loss to the destruction of the first, but the Empire would still be very powerful. And with it, you can't help but feel sorry for both the Sith who were tricked into using the thought bomb thinking they could survive, and the Jedi who went and sacrificed themselves so they could go and wipe out the Sith, because with it, you could just see the horrible fates that they are in as they are trapped in this orb forever, where they'll be tormented until I believe in one of the Jedi Knight games they are released. At least the Jedi spirits. I'm not sure if the Sith spirits are released or if they are still kept to be tormented, but yeah, that is pretty interesting, and I definitely love just how they went and had Bane manipulate them, and you can just see how evil he became. And you also get some just cool references to the past with stuff like Revan being the one to inspire the rule of two, and them going to the Rakan homeworld as you get to see what happened to the race, and by this point they are completely wiped out, with none of the Rakans being left at all. And that is interesting to see. And yeah, honestly, I think that is something really cool. And I want to move on to the next book, The Rule of Two. And The Rule of Two was another interesting book. With this, you get to see how Bane and his apprentice, Dark Xana, are going and starting to set up the Sith Order for their eventual conquest of the Republic. And the main plot of this story is actually Bane trying to construct his Sith holocron, and with it, his apprentice is just learning from him and becoming more powerful. And with it, it has some interesting stuff. It has us returning to Rusan to see just how devastating the war was there, and how a planet that was extremely hot at one point and warm was destroyed so much by this war and the thought bomb that the climate was permanently changed and many of the species were wiped out in the cold since it began to have snowstorms. Some other interesting stuff that happens in this is you get to see the demilitarization of the Republic with the Rusan Reformation, and you get to see how this will eventually lead into the conflicts inside the Senate during the prequels, where they don't want to go and recreate a Grand Army of the Republic, and why there was no Republic Army for all these years, and the specific circumstances that led up to it. And you can definitely understand why this would happen, because the Jedi and Sith were just going to war so many times and just causing millions of deaths at a minimum. And with it, things just continue to become more and more intense until one side won, usually the Jedi, and then it would just happen again just a little bit later. And they would have been right if the Sith were wiped out and Bane didn't survive. There wouldn't be anything they had to worry about, since there would be no major dark side threats that would pop up, since most of it is caused by Palpatine establishing the Empire and wiping out the Jedi Order with Order 66. Yeah, with this, it is really interesting just to see just these little changes in the Republic, but also you get to see how Bane and his apprentice Xana are trying to go and avoid the Jedi and stay in the shadows. And at the end of the book, they are nearly discovered where Bane's nearly indestructible Orbalisk armor is destroyed when he goes and kills off a group of Jedi who were tracking him down after being tipped off by Xana's cousin, who they let live as a small little gift for Xena joining the Sith Order when she was a child. And with it, the two go and manage to kill these Jedi, including from the first book, Jedi Master Hoth's first apprentice. And yeah, it was a pretty sad moment for these Jedi to all lose their lives. And then it's even worse in terms for the galaxy, but would ruin the great story that comes after. And with it, we see how Bane is taken to the healer Khalib, and he is someone from the first book who Bane blackmailed into healing him, and his apprentice is able to strike a similar deal, although she has to reveal that a Sith Lord lives to the Jedi. And with this, she does tell Bane, who is furious and wants her to leave, but she's able to go and trick the Jedi, breaking the mind of her cousin and having them believe that her cousin was the Sith Lord. And with this, her cousin goes and attacks them with a lightsaber, and the Jedi just go and cut him down, thinking they killed the final Sith Lord. And with it, Zana and Bane are able to escape. And yeah, that is really interesting. And Bane is able to figure out how to make a holocron, which he does, and that is shown off a few times in the next book. But yeah, this was a really interesting story, and I think it'd probably be the weakest of the three, since it's just, more of one trying to set everything up. And although the story still is really good, of the three stories, I'd say it is the weakest. Well, that's not really an insult to it, it's more exposition and setting stuff up in this book, and not as big and intense moments as the first one or the third one. And the third one, which obviously would be the second best since I said Path of Destruction is the best and Rule of Two would be the worst of the trilogy, is titled Dynasty of Evil. And with it, you get to see how, a decade after the events of the Rule of Two, Bane is starting to doubt his apprentice will ever challenge him to become the master and just wait for him to die of old age or to become too old to be able to defend himself. And seeing that as a major problem, he goes and learns the secret of essence transfer, so he would not pass off his legacy to an unworthy apprentice, while Xana is actually planning to go and kill her master, but first wanted an apprentice. And with it, she goes and first finds one candidate named Sethearth, and with it, he is someone who would ultimately wind up not becoming her apprentice, but also not only survives, but from what I looked at, he's able to survive pretty far into the Star Wars timeline since he steals the same holocron that Bane has with the secret to essence transfer. And although I cannot confirm if this is true, it says that he lives at least to the Yuzang Vong War, which takes place after the original trilogy and a good time after too. So there's a chance that this guy will live for over 1,000 years, switching into cloned bodies. And with it, that is really interesting, and it's just something that's really cool. And I'm wondering just how he managed to go and do it without ever being detected, since the Jedi did know of him since he was a former Jedi, and he also betrayed a Sith Lord. And I'm just curious if the Legends continued, if we would ever get a book or series of books following his story, since it'd be pretty interesting to see someone who lived from the beginning of Bane's era with the Rule of Two to after the Rule of Two was finished with the final Sith Lords in it, Vader and Palpatine being killed. But yeah, looking at it, I just have so much fun reading this. It's a pretty dark story where Khalib's daughter is seeking revenge and goes and destroys not only her life, but the lives of those she cares about. And we get to see just how Bane is preparing to go and replace Zana until he makes it to the end of the book where he realizes that she is taking his lessons to heart and knows that she is, but still needs her to be proving herself worthy by killing him in a duel. So with this, him and Zana battle in the same world where Khalib died, and he just recently killed Khalib's daughter. And with this, you get a really just intense fight between the two, where the new apprentice, the Huntress, who would later be known as Darth Cognitus, watches to learn who her new master will become. And with it, Zana is able to kill Darth Bane, although it is hinted that Bane may have taken control of her with essence transfer. It seems like she is the one who is in control, and she goes and trains the Huntress until she's eventually killed by the Huntress. And yeah, honestly, this is just a really great book. It's really great for the terms of just wrapping up the trilogy and tying off all the loose ends. But yeah, honestly, I want to know what you think about this. Tell me what you think about the trilogy in the comments, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Legends and Theories. Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, check out the video on screen, and may the Force be with you.